All right, I'm going to continue on and write the third constructor, but what I'm going to ask is if you would all please look up here for a minute. Don't type this because I'm going to change it back. But imagine, I'm just going to use first name and last name. Imagine when I passed those in, I had literally used the same names, which is totally legal. If I had done that and used those actual names, then I would have to say this dot fname equals fname, and this dot lname equals lname. If I left the word this and the dot off, it gives me a warning. And it says basically what you're doing is you're taking this one and you're copying it to itself. You probably don't want to do that, do you? So the reason that I made these names different is so that I could come in here and I didn't have to use the word this. There's nothing wrong with using the word this. All right? So now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say SSN equals sock and just put the rest in. Now, I got a question for you. If you look on the screen here, I'm going to type in here validate height, and I'm going to pass in the height. And then I'm going to type in validate weight, and I'm going to pass in the weight. Why do those have red squigglies under them? Come on, you should be able to figure this out. We haven't written it. We're calling something that doesn't exist. So when C# sees this, the first thing it does is it says, oh, I must have a built-in routine called validate height. So it looks through its library of routines and says, no, I don't. Then it says, oh, you must have something there that's called validate height. So it looks through everything we have. It doesn't find it. That's why it gives you the error message. So we're going to write that. All right, so I'm going to go way down to the bottom here, right down before the bottom, so I'm still inside of here, so I'm still inside of class person, so I'm going to go way down to the bottom, so right here, and I'm going to write public void validate height int h for height. All right, notice once I've done that, I don't get any errors here, and when I go back up here, I don't have an error here. All right? Now, first, don't type this. I'm going to show you what I consider to be the wrong way to write this, although it works just fine. Okay? I'm going to show you what I consider to be the wrong way to write it, but it works. So I'm going to come in here and say this. If h greater than min height, min h, I guess we called it, or h less than max h, then h equals def h, else, that's not h, I'm sorry, that's height, else height equals h. And that, you know what? There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It works just fine. But we can collapse that down by using an operator that we talked about last semester and this semester, that question mark colon operator. So we can cut this down so it's a lot smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to come over to here, and I'm going to click right there. So I'm going to keep it there, but I'm going to comment it out. And I'm going to change that so it looks like the following. All right. So I'm going to say here height equals h less than, I'm sorry, greater than or equal to the minimum height and h less than or equal to the maximum height, and that's h, not height. All right. So if that's the case, And I'm going to put this over several lines just so you can see it, and I can go over each part of it. That's all. All right, so if that's the case, I'm going to say here, question mark, H, colon, def H. All right, so that does the same thing. Literally, I could have written that on one line. I just didn't know if it would all fit. You'd be able to see it. So rather than writing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines, I replaced it with really one line that's over 3 lines. All right. I could have literally come in here and put all this on one line, and it would have worked just fine. That's the way I did it. Now, if you say that's too hard, I don't understand it, then you should do it the second way that's commented out. I've said this to you on more than one occasion. Right now, you should be programming for understandability on your part. So if the first way doesn't make that much sense, then do it the second way. All right, that's totally fine. Now, if you were working in a professional atmosphere and you did it the second way, you'd probably find somebody who'd come up to you and say, you know, you can do that with a lot less code, right? And they tell you once. And then if you did it again, they would assume you're an imbecile. Sorry, but I'm speaking from personal experience. All right? When I was advised to do something and I still didn't get it, so I didn't do it, and they were like, you're a jerk. All right? Then they explained it to me in more depth. Then I saw what they meant and why they meant it. It wasn't even just so much because it saved on code, but it was a difference in how fast the thing actually executed. Then I changed it. Then I wasn't, pardon my French, I wasn't an asshole. I was just a jerk. All right. So, what is this saying here? This right there, this that you see in blue, that says if it's within range, meaning it's between, meaning that the height is between 12 inches and 96 inches, then take that height that we passed in and set it to height. Otherwise, it's not within range, so set it to the default. All right? And the thing that's nice about this is once we've written this, I can go and grab the whole thing right there, go right underneath where I am, and guess what? Put in a validate weight. Just change all those H's in there to W's. Now, I haven't called this yet, but I'm going to in a minute. Make sure you don't miss any. And I really don't need this thing over here that I commented out. I really don't need that. I already did it once. All right. So now I've got both my validate height and my validate weight. So they're both done. I'm only calling the validate height right now. I'm not yet calling the validate weight. I will call that in just a minute. All right. But what I want you to understand is these are basically the same routine. Don't write them as one routine, though. Well, I saved some more code, Jeff, because no, don't do that. They're manipulating two different variables. Ideally, when you write a routine, it's doing one job. Validating the height and validating the weight are two jobs. And they're small routines anyway, as you can see. All right? Now, there are places that it's possible you could go to work for a place that says, no, we don't care how big our routines are, we just don't want very many of them, which is kind of the opposite of the way most people think. All right? And if you go to work for a place like that, then maybe they'll tell you to do it the other way. I don't know. So now I just go back up here, and where I was going to put in this, well, I do have it, validate weight. All right? So now those are all done. Okay? And what's left? Well, I think we had, what, the eye color and the hair color, and so, whoops, sorry. So eye color, equals EC, yep, hair color equals HC, and gender equals G. So this is the case where everything has been passed in. All right? And I mean, we've already written pretty close to probably around 150 lines of code. Probably closer to 100 with all the comments and stuff. But I'm more concerned that you understand, that you have at least a minimal understanding of what's going on in here. All right? There's only one more routine that we want to write in here. All right? And it's going to be this toString routine. Okay? When you put in something, like if I say here, write line, and I put in hello. If I put that into a program, you know what happens. It's going to write hello on the screen. You get that. But what literally happens behind the scenes, under the covers, however you want to refer to that, is it calls a method called toString. What we want to have happen is right now, if we did all this and we filled in John Smith and we did all this stuff, all right, if we said write line and we put in here John, anybody want to take a guess as to what would write out if we did this? So imagine we did person John equal new person, double quote John, double quote, comma, double quote Smith, double quote, then we said write line John. Anybody have any wild guesses as to what would print out? Probably an address. And it would be an address in memory of where the John Smith object began its life. That's probably what you'd get. We want to overwrite it, so when we say write line John, it's going to say first name John, last name Smith, social security number equals whatever. That's what we're doing here. So we have to take the toString method and we have to override it. When we override it, we're literally saying replace it with this one. All right? Here, look on the screen, please, because this is the most important thing I've said today. Here, we are overloading a method, which means every time the method has the same name, but it has different values in the parentheses. Here, we're about to override a method. That means we're literally replacing something with something else. So to do that, we have to say public override string to string. All right? And you notice I didn't put this return base dot, I didn't put that in there. I just hit enter and the system put it in. It's trying to protect me. I'll leave it there for right now, but I'm going to change it in just a minute. All right? I'll leave it there for right now, but I'm going to change it. So I'm going to say this. String str, there's nothing special about that name other than it's the name I gave it, equals, and I'm going to put in here and I don't need a paren. All right, and I'm going to just start filling this up. And I don't need the word string there. Okay. Now hopefully when I created this, I didn't screw up at all. I didn't try to. But what that's saying is we're going to create this big string that's got the value of everything that we have in it. All right, and every time that we call WriteLine followed by the name of our object, this is what should print. And the good news is, as far as I know, unless I missed something, I don't think I did, this is it for this person class. Now we've got to go back and we've got to write main. All right, which unfortunately isn't that small. All right. So what I'm going to show you right now is how we're going to write main, and not really a great way of doing it. All right, but tomorrow, what I'd like you to for tomorrow, I'd like you, if you have the time, please, again, to look at that one PDF I gave you on collections, because I'm going to talk to you about an array list, which can grow and shrink dynamically. And I want to talk to you about some of those other data structures that are in that handout. Why? Because there's a good chance if you become a programmer, sooner or later you'll be working with those kinds of data structures. All right? So again, I said this to you before. If we went and ran this right now, we'd get no output because main's not doing anything. All right, so that's what we have to do next. Has everybody been able to catch up or keep up? Like I said, you've got quite a bit to type in. That's like 160 lines of code. I understand that. And I thought of giving you the hard copies. The problem is, again, when I give you hard copies, people just end up, all they do is they end up typing it in. They're not thinking about what they're doing. And I know because I've fallen victim, so to speak, to doing the same thing. All right, and it's funny because I take a lot of classes online, and virtually every class I take, the instructor will say, now, either type along with me or watch, and when I'm done, pause the tape and type it in yourself. Because if you don't, you're not going to understand what's going on. But usually they're right. All right, so I'm going to go back up, and now, like I said, I'm going to start writing main. All right, so we get in here. And I'm going to comment it probably more than I have to. But I'm going to say here, we will now instantiate 6 different person objects. All right, now I used the names of people in my family. You don't like that? Use your own stuff. It really and truly, again, doesn't matter. All right, so, but every time I did this, I put a comment saying what they were all about. So I said here, person Jeff has all default values. All right, so person Jeff equals new person. Okay, again, you're all smart people in here. You should realize that when this gets called, the system will automatically look for a constructor with no parameters. Once it finds it, it will execute all the code that's underneath there. So it will come in and it will say, and I'll go right back to it. It will say, it will add 1 to the person count. Oh, sorry, wrong one. And then it will fill in the names with default values. So the first name will be the default first name, which was like unknown FN. And the last name will be what? Unknown LN. Then it'll fill the defaults in. So the social security number will be XXX, -X, etc. It'll do all that stuff. All right. Now, I'm going to put this in. You don't even have to put this in, but I want to show you that right now, just for now, I'm going to put in here a read line. So my program stops, and then I'm going to put in here a write line, Jeff. And then so it doesn't go off the screen, I'm going to put in another read line. You know by now why we're getting these errors. I've got to go back up to the top here. I can get rid of these because they're gray. and I want to using static system.console. Now those have all gone away. All right. And why am I doing this? So I can take this, I can run the program. It's thinking about it. All right, that's the first read line, so it stopped, and now it's showing me that. So I can go back now and double check and make sure that every one of those defaults was indeed set. So in other words, I can take this, I can knock this down as far as its size here. Then in my program, I can go back here to all these constants because that's what the default values were. And unknown FN, unknown LN, the X's, 72 was the default height, 175 was the default weight, blue was the default eye color, brown was the default hair color, F was the default gender. So I was able to check that and make sure that when I ran it and entered nothing, now I know my default constructor works. Does that make sense? Yes? All right. Because what you have to do, I mean, writing software is half the battle. Testing it is the other half. And you've got to make sure that when you do this, you're testing everything. All right. So now that it's hit that second read line, yes?
I was just going to ask if you could go down to the...
All right. But now it stopped. So now it did this, in other words. And if right now I printed out the person count, it should say 1. Because I made 1 person. I'm not going to do that until the end, but it should. It should say that. All right. And I could write more in here. I actually did in mine, rather than just write that, in there like that. But now that worked. I know that. Well, that's a good start. So that was the first one. Okay, so now I want to come in here and I'm going to create my second person. All right, and now I can come in here and say person Sandy, which is what I'm going to write next, has a first name and a last name, but should use defaults for all other values. So in other words, I'm going to say person Sandy equals new person, and we'll give her a first name, and we'll give her a last name, but that's it. So you all know now that that should fill in those 2 values for first and last name, but the rest of it should all be defaults. So I'm going to put the same thing in here after this. So I'm going to put in a read line, a write line, but this time of Sandy. All right. Now, I'll come right back to it, I promise. But let me run this. Oh, that's an error because I put sand in there instead of Sandy. There. So, run it again. There's all the Jeff stuff. Yeah. There's the Sandy stuff. First name it took, last name it took, default, 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 default. Does that make sense? 2 more things as I go back to the code. 2 more things. First thing is, you know what? I want to do a console.clear before I do any of these. So everyone will be on their own line. On their own screen, I should say. So every time I do one of these, I'm going to do a console.clear first. Second, I already printed out the Jeff information, so I'm going to comment it out now. I can comment it back in anytime I want, but I just commented it out because I have no reason to print it again. So I have now tested, right now, I have tested I have come in here and I have tested, and I know that works, and I know that works. So now I've got to make another person. All right, I've got to make yet another person. And when I make that other person, I want to give them all values. All right, but think about this. Yes, I want to give them all values, but I still have to check for an outer range height and an outer range weight. Does that make sense? All right. So I'm going to make a few more people in here, in other words. In fact, I'm going to get rid of that blank line there. And that blank line there. All right. So, like I said, now I'm going to highlight this and hit my thing to comment that out. All right. And I'll keep that line uncommented. So I've created two people so far. So now I'm going to come through here and I'm going to create another person. And I'm going to say person Taylor has a value for each field, but her weight is out of range. And you should know that being out of range means either it's less than 1 or it's greater than 777. All right? So I'm going to come in here and say person Taylor equals new person and again, we're going to put in a height, or a height, we'll make a height that's within range, 60, I don't know, well, she's probably 66, and a weight that's out of range. So I'm going to put in 0 on purpose. All right, so I've got a height, I've got a weight, I need an eye color. In fact, let's put in something different. Brown. I need a hair color, and again, we'll put in something different. All right, and that's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I need a gender, so I'll put in her gender. All right, and I'll say right line Taylor. Now, again, please look at this. You should all know when it writes this, it should write Taylor, Scott, 111, 223333, 66. But since that's out of range, it should write the default for the weight. The default is 175 pounds. She's not 175 pounds. All right? But that's what it should write. And then it should write brown for the hair color, the eye color, I'm sorry, blonde for the hair color, and F for the gender. Does that all make sense? All right? In fact, I'm going to come in here and do the same thing we just did. So I'm going to do another console clear, a read line, a write line of Taylor, and another read line. Oops. So I'm going to save and try to run it again. This is her information, and the thing to look at is look at her weight. It was put in as 0, it was input as 0, but it's been changed to the default value of 175. All right. So then I'm going to create another person. All right, and I'm going to make her height out of range. And we'll say, I don't know, let's make it, I think 96 was the top, let's make it 97. All right. Change a couple of these. All right. And let's make her weight just 100. All right. So again, when this one is run, that should be the first name. That should be the last name. That should be the social security number. The height is out of range, so it should be replaced with the default height, which I believe was 72. There's the weight. There's the eye color. There's the hair color, or vice versa, whatever it was. And there's the gender. All right. So if we save that and run it, you'll notice that the height was reset. It was out of range at 97. It's been reset, so it's at 72. So right now, what we have checked in these first 4 that we have in here, first we checked just that all the defaults were being set. They were, that was me. Then we checked that if if the first name and last name only are passed in, that the rest are defaulted. That was Sandy. That worked. Then we checked Taylor with all valid values except the weight. Then we checked Kenzie with all valid values except the height. All right. So let's make another one where everything is valid and make sure that that's working. And then let's run this one. All right, valid, 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 valid. So that worked. So to my knowledge, all right, to my knowledge, what we did was we basically checked everything. Now, should I check other things? Sure. I should check both the height and the weight out of range. I should do stuff like that. Does that make sense? The problem is, think about this. We've got 8 fields, and I don't know if any of you know anything about statistics, but if we talked about how many permutations there were, all right, that's a lot of possibilities. We could make up easily 100 checks to make sure everything worked. But as far as I can tell here, it all works. Questions? All right, then the first, yes, sir.
If you're making a form and like you have required fields, should you make a default one?
The question was, if you have a form and you have required fields, should you make a default one? I'll just give you an example of where you might. Okay, not everybody in the world, like people in other countries, don't have middle initials or middle names. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes I was watching a thing online for talking about this, where I watched a person who did it, and I was going to use his, but I didn't like the way he wrote it. But he mentioned that for a while he worked for the government. He was in Turkey. And his name, he was from another country, so it was like Abril or something like that. But his middle name was Richard. But there, people, they didn't know they had middle names. So they never used his last name. His middle name became his last name. See what I'm saying? So that, something like that, but what you just said is true. You could make an argument for that. All right. You know, again, should we make checks? If we say somebody is 12 inches tall, yet weighs 173 pounds, that would be very strange. You know what I'm saying? So should we make checks like that? I don't know. But again, if we're supposing that our data is coming from a database then we're probably also supposing that that data has already been validated before we get it. Then all this validation can go away for the height and weight that we put in. All right? Okay. Yes?
Go back up to staff, I think I missed something. Program is not running.
I commented out in here, I commented in or just left in the fact that we created 5 or 6 people. That's it. All right, then what I would like you to do, if you look up on the screen here, please, is I'd like you to go down to your person class that's right there. See this? I'd like you to go down to this person class. Do not include these lines. Do not include those 2 lines. You'll see why in just a minute. But starting where it says declare and initialize class constants, go ahead and highlight all the way till we get to the bottom of the class. But again, don't include the last curly brace, the ending curly. All right, so to right there. In my case, if you wrote it exactly the way I did, it would be from line 56 all the way down to, but not including, line 193. All right? And all I want you to do, if that's all highlighted, is to just copy it to the clipboard. That's all for now. All right? Don't do a Control X and tell me in 10 minutes, oh, I listened to you and I removed it. Now I don't have it anymore. No, don't do that. Always work with a copy. All right? But start up another session of Visual Studio. So just right mouse click on the icon if you have it on your taskbar and choose Visual Studio. I don't want you to remove the one you've got. We may have to go back to it. All right? So with this up here, what we created before, I believe, correct me please if I'm wrong, for the project we did a console right here, and we put in here person 1, and we put in here OOP demo 1. We're going to change this, so this will now say person 02 or 2, doesn't matter. And I'm going to call this OOP demo 02. All right. So right now, it's going to look kind of like it did when we first started. The only thing that's going to be different is this now says person 2, where previously it said person 1. All right? But this is where it changes. Please look up on the screen. I want everybody to right mouse click on your solution. I'm sorry, on the name of your project, right there. Okay, where it says person 2. Right mouse click on there and choose add. And now you've got 2 choices. You can either go down to the very bottom where it says class, or you can choose new item and it defaults to class. See that? You do it either way. It doesn't matter. All right? And we're going to call this class, here's a big surprise, person. All right? That's a new file now. Everybody hear me? It's a new file. Now go to right here and paste in everything that you just put in there. Now you've got that person file done as its own file. When you do your test, all right, it'll probably be like this. It'll probably be a console app, but I'm going to ask you to create different classes, you know, for everything, because that's what object-oriented programming is about. Is you have objects that you have that may be from the same class. You may have objects from different classes, and they communicate with one another via the sending of messages, and that's what I'm trying to show you. All right. So with that done, I'm going to go back up here to my other file that's called program.cs, and that's this one. You remember that. Now I can go back to my other program, and I can find that main, and I can copy all of that in. Again, don't include the curly braces. So now I've got the same program, but I've got it in two different formats. All right. Originally, it was all included, enclosed, whatever you want to call it, in the same file. Now it's in two different files. That's the way that you should actually code. So why'd I show it to you that way? Because that's how most books show it to you. All right. Now, I want to just one last thing here. I want to explain why this way is so much better. We could literally write a whole new main that didn't look anything like our last one did and put it in here. Now what we have is a person class that we can add as needed to any program we write. And that's what we're actually going to do next week, because we're going to take that person class and we're going to inherit from that class and make another class called employee. Because why? Every employee is a person. And after we get that working, we're going to make 3 or 4 kinds of employees. So you can start to see when you break this down what it looks like and how it's used. All right. So if I save this and run it, it should look exactly like the other one. Well, it says I got an error. Oh, I've still got to come in there and remove that or add that using static system.console. All right, now run it. And the only one I've got is the last one, and there it is. So that was the idea behind today, was to show you this. All right. Did you have a question there, Chris?
Yeah, the override string, the 2 strings at the very bottom. How does the computer know to run that? Because my thing is coming up clear.
Then I'll be glad to take a look at what you've done in just a minute. Okay. All right. Now, last thing, and you're going to get the last hour and a half or so to work on it as a lab. But when I come in here, so today, go over person part 1, go over person part 2, lab rest of the period. Again, you're going to get this. Don't write it down. I'm going to email it to you as soon as I clean it up a little bit. This will be your homework. 4, 6, and 9 at the end of the chapter. We're going to do 4 and 9 tomorrow as a class. Excuse me, and you will work on 6 by yourselves. It will be due a week from tomorrow, all 3 on the 28th. All right? So I don't know how long that will take tomorrow. All right? And then Friday, when you come in, we'll take our written test on Chapter 9. And as soon as we're done with the written test, the rest of the period will be a lab. Then next Monday, you'll have a hands-on test that you can, some of you may finish in an hour. Some of you may need the entire period. So if you finish early, the rest of the period will be lab. All right, then on Tuesday, we'll go over it if we need to, and I'll start the lecture on Chapter 10. All right, like I said, I'm still writing this. I didn't have a chance to finish all that. But as soon as I get that done, all right, I'll send out a copy to everybody. But what I wanted to mention to you then is I'm all caught up. And if that's the case, then you probably want to turn to pages 415 and 416 and at least look at those assignments that we're going to work on tomorrow. It's kind of nice if you have at least read the prologue or the requirements in the book, so you're not walking in there totally blind, so to speak. But that's what we're going to do tomorrow. And I appreciated the questions and the comments today. I hope they keep coming. If there's something tomorrow, and quite often, Christian, you're right. When you say, couldn't you have done this? Couldn't you? Yeah, a lot of times, yes. All right? But even with this, and I said this before, please, it's not at all meant to be funny. So if it sounds like I'm panning for humor, I'm not. There's no police that are watching you when you're writing this. All right? There are certain rules that you are expected to follow. Does everybody follow them? Yeah, right, in your dreams. But I've said this before, there's a lot more bad code out there on the system than there is good code. All right? And all I can do is try to teach you the way that people are supposed to be doing it. But again, you could go to work for a company and we don't do it that way. Then don't do it that way. You know, you want to keep your job, you do it whatever way they tell you to do it. And, you know, again, you don't walk in there and say, well, you know, I have this instructor and I think he knows more than you. And what he's sitting on, don't ever say that. You laugh, but I had a guy who went into an interview, and right at the end of the interview, they asked him, have you seen our website? And he pulled out a piece of paper and he goes, yeah, and I have some suggestions for you. He did that in the interview. And then he told me later, he goes, yeah, the whole interview changed after that. Gee, you think? You went in there, somebody right out of school, telling these people who have been working on this thing for years what you didn't like about their website? I said, you think you could have gotten hired first and then done it? He goes, well, I don't know. You think they'll call me back? I said, I wouldn't sit by the phone and wait. All right? So you know what we'll be doing. And again, I will have this sent out to you. All right? It's 10:11 by 10:30. All right? That's all I have. Any other questions? Again, you don't have to turn this in. This is meant for you to use it as a guide. So next week when you're doing something similar for the test, oh, okay, I can just kind of modify this or you may even want to have that one up and on the screen while you're working on the test. I don't know. All right?